going to unmute Adrian and hand over to him, and I'm going to replace him in center screen. Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you, Sharon. It's shocking to me that it's almost 30 years since the first edition of Good Practice was published. I was minister of a local church at the time, and I well remember the impact it had upon us. Volunteer helper forms, consent forms, medical forms, some of those things that help keep people safer were introduced for the first time. And it all felt like a big thing, another level of admin for already stretched volunteers. And that's when I first started hearing the mantra that safeguarding was a burden being imposed upon churches from outside by government or the state, a compliance issue alongside health and safety and data protection and copyright and food hygiene and accessible buildings and the rest. And it's a mantra that's been repeated with each new iteration of good practice, often accompanied by tutting and a rolling of eyes. And I'm sure it's one that will recur as this newest version hits hard drives and inboxes and doormats over the coming weeks. It's all nonsense, of course. Safeguarding, that is to say, taking steps to ensure that the most vulnerable in our communities are protected from harm, is not something that's imposed upon us from outside the church. It's actually a central theme in our Bibles, and it is therefore a fundamental facet of our faith. Flick through your Bible and you'll very quickly come to Genesis, where God created humanity to be in loving relationship with God, others, and all of creation. Love is to be at the heart of all relationships and encounters. Continue your flicking of pages, and in Proverbs, you'll find a king recalling the advice given him by his mother to speak out for those who cannot speak and for the rights of all who are vulnerable. A few pages further on, you'll come to Isaiah and read that God doesn't look for outward signs of piety. Instead, God looks for us to loose the bonds of injustice, to undo the straps of the yoke, and to let the oppressed go free. When you get to the New Testament, you find that Jesus once said, "If any of you calls one of these little ones who believe in me to stumble, it would be better for you if a great millstone were fastened around your neck and you were drowned in the depth of the sea." He also told a story which has people asking, "When was it that we saw you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and did not take care of you?" To which the response is, "Truly I tell you, just as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me." "I came that they may have life and have it abundantly," said Jesus, "not meanly or brutally or viciously, life abundantly." And later in the New Testament, you find James in his letter saying that religion that is pure and undefiled before God is this: to care for orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself unstained by the world. And those 7 passages are just the starter for 10 of questions from the Bible that are about justice and about God's concern for those on the margins of society, whether they be children or orphans or widows or strangers, or in fact anyone who is in any way other. There are thousands of passages to choose from in there. And when the same things keep cropping up as we read our Bibles, albeit in different ways, then we have to take them very seriously indeed. Standing up for the vulnerable is not one of those optional extras of being church, like robes for ministers, or a preference for one hymn book over another, or the way in which communion is served, or gifts of money received and blessed week by week. Standing up for those who have no voice, defending the rights of the vulnerable, taking every step we possibly can to keep the most susceptible in our communities safe from harm. These things must be central to our faith and calling as disciples of Jesus in this 21st century. And that's why in the URC structure, safeguarding sits in the discipleship department and not in the admin and resources department like other compliance issues. It's because safeguarding is about who and what we are as disciples of Jesus. So safeguarding should never be regarded as yet another compliance issue. It's at the heart of who and what we are as disciples. And may that always be so. And may God bless us as we seek to make it so.
Thank you, Adrian. Our first session of this afternoon is going to be led by Kerry. She's going to have a couple of church safeguarding coordinators join her, Sonia and Margaret. So, Kerry, are you good to start?
Yes, I'm good to go. Thank you very much, Sharon. So what I want to do today is introduce Good Practice 6, give an overview of what it's going to look like, and some idea of the key points that are there, things that have changed. I won't be going into a lot of the sort of detail. It's more to give a flavour, to give a sense of kind of what it looks like, why we've made some of the changes that we have, and how we hope it can be useful. So I'm going to cover 4 areas. I hope this is showing up on everyone's screens. If not, someone will wave at me. But 4 main areas. So the first one is just to give you an overview of the key features of Good Practice 6, what's changed, what the structure's like, and that'll be the section I spend most of the time on. That's the longest part. That's to give you an overview of what Good Practice 6 looks like. Then I'm going to backtrack slightly and just give a little bit of information about the process of how we've got to this point, how we moved from Good Practice 5 to Good Practice 6, and explain 1 or 2 of the reasons for why things have been changed in the way that they have. And then thirdly, we'll just look at the practical question of how do we use Good Practice 6? What does it mean now? Once you get copies, what do we do next? How do we actually apply it in practice? And then very briefly at the end, just a sort of the future and what happens from now on. So, and then a section on a division of responsibilities. And that's a little bit more detailed than it was in Good Practice 5. And it sets out different responsibilities at different levels of the church and tries to make it as explicit as possible who's responsible for which different things. So that's the sort of background underpinning chapter. We have safer culture, and that includes things like specific roles, such as church safeguarding coordinators. It covers things like having policies, doing the annual reports. It includes the safer recruitment, DBS checks, and all the other things that go with safer recruitment. Training is in this section, and then also some material around data protection. So things that can be a sort of everyday part of church life, helping to embed, good practice and a culture in which safeguarding is taken seriously. Then we have a section on safer activities, which includes things like lettings, church work that may be happening in private homes. We have some general principles which can apply to any kind of activity. So that's things like doing a risk assessment or requiring insurance. we've got some specific details on particular activities under safer ways of working. So that includes things like use of images, video, technology, people who are driving on behalf of the church, those kinds of things. And then some specific things for children and adults and relating to the activities that might be done particularly with those groups. Then we have the section on recognising and responding to concerns. And this is probably the one that's got the most sort of overlap with Good Practice 5. So a lot of what was in Good Practice 5 is the same as in this section here. So we have the information about the different types of abuse, recognising problems. We've added in some material about other concerns that might come up. So for example, around people with dementia, perhaps. So we've broadened it out a little bit to include some other material and some other concerns. And then we have the material on how to respond. And again, this hasn't changed very much, so it will still be familiar to many of you. The 4 R's, recognising, responding, recording, and reporting. And then we have a bit of information on what to do when you need to contact statutory services. The 5th chapter deals with, I know that the material that some people find perhaps particularly difficult or daunting, and that's where there might be an allegation against someone within the church and how to deal with that. So this is quite a detailed chapter and setting out, all the procedures, who needs to be notified, all the different actions that might be necessary in that kind of setting, and also information around working with those who might present a risk to others, people with certain convictions and so on. And there's guidance there on risk assessment, safeguarding agreements, and those kinds of things. And then the final chapter, supporting victims and survivors. And that is divided into broadly 2 main areas. One is sort of building a supportive culture within the church. So things like raising awareness, having resources, thinking about worship and other events and how those are managed, and creating a sort of environment that will be supportive, and then looking specifically at individuals who may need particular help and what that might look like and different ways that we may be able to help individuals in those circumstances. So what we've done, I'm sorry that was a bit of a whistle stop, but hopefully it gives you an overview of what's in the different chapters of the new guidance. It is quite a long document. It's a little bit shorter than Good Practice 5, but it is still quite long. And we're aware that it's quite detailed and sometimes it can appear a little bit daunting. So at the beginning of each chapter, what we've done is include a summary of the key practice points. What are the sort of really essential, important things to focus on? This is an example. Don't worry about reading the detail. It may not be that clear in the text, but it's just to give an example of what's there. So this is from the Safer Culture section, and there'll be a section like this at the beginning of each chapter, just highlighting what are the really critical key points that we want everyone to be aware of when they're thinking about that topic. And then we've also put at the beginning of each chapter a list of responsibilities at the local church level, at synod level, and then at the denominational level. And that is to help give that clarity as to who does what and who has responsibilities for different things. So each of the chapters starts with that key practice points, key responsibilities to highlight the really sort of essential things that we would think would be most helpful for people to focus on. So going back to this diagram, this is the sort of basis around which we've developed Good Practice 6. So it's all structured around this. The documents are also color-coded in line with this diagram. So the chapters have some color that matches this diagram, again, just to make it hopefully a little bit easier to find your way around the document and to know sort of which section you're in. So the main document is structured around this, and then we also have additional resources. So these are what were previously called appendices in Good Practice 5. We've renamed them as resources for this edition. Appendices can sound a little bit dry, technical. Resources, we hope, sound like helpful, useful things that you might want to use practically in your local context. So they've been renamed as resources and also reorganized. So we've tried to make it clearer what the purpose of the different documents is. So with the appendices that we had in Good Practice 5, we've gone from Appendix A up to Appendix Z. So we sort of used up the whole alphabet. And also there were different kinds of documents in there that were doing different purposes. So we've regrouped them and restructured them into these different categories. So there'll be some additional resources which are about guidance. So that is where we can give more detail on certain topics that we didn't want to put in the main text because it would have made it all too long. So there will be some additional information and guidance on particular topics. We have codes of conduct for working with different groups. We have a group of documents which are forms, as it says. So things like the safeguarding concern form, annual returns form, all of those will be grouped together as forms. And then we also have a section, and this is where most of the documents come, templates and model documents. So those are resources that can be adapted, changed, tweaked to suit your particular circumstances. So that would cover things like policy templates, some of the documents that Adrian mentioned earlier, consent forms, and so on. So all of the things that are in those templates are amendable and can be used and adapted. And then we will have also some links to other resources, other organisations that we think can provide some useful extra advice and information. So the resources will all come under one of those different headings, which hopefully will make them easier to use. It will mean getting used to some new numbers. So the names and numbers have changed slightly. So there will be a little bit of getting used to that. But just as an example, this is two of those groups, the codes of conduct and the forms. And you can see they're sort of numbered within their sections. So as I say, yes, we will need to just get used to some new numbers, but it will make it easier and more flexible. If we need to add a new document, a new resource in future, we can just add it in to a particular section and not worry about what we call it at the end of the alphabet. So hopefully those resources will become sort of a little easier to use, easier to find the ones that you need. So that is an overview of what's in Good Practice 5, Good Practice 6 rather, the main document and the resources. I'm just going to step back slightly now and talk about how we got to this point and why we've done some of the things that we've done. And I hope it will make sense to do it in this order, having seen a little bit of what it looks like, to now see sort of why we got to where we did and how we came to those choices. So we've been working on a three-stage process over the last year. I came in to URC last year and have been working on this since then. So the first thing we did was just collect lots of information. So there had been a number of comments and feedback on Good Practice 5 that had been accumulated over the last couple of years. So we had that to start with. We've been having a look at other churches, their policies, their documents, and what they do. And we also did an online survey at the end of last year. And there are people here who responded to that. Thank you very much. It was very helpful. We had nearly 200 responses on that survey, and we got a lot of feedback from that on what people liked about Good Practice 5, what they thought could be done differently. And we have built some of that in to the decisions that we've made. So, for example, one of the things that came out very strongly from that online survey was that people wanted the resource documents to be easier to print and adapt locally at home, whether people are printing at home or in a local church. They wanted more printer-friendly documents that could be used. So that's one thing that an example of something we've taken from the survey and put into the new material, and hopefully they will, the new designs will meet that sort of request that we had from a number of respondents. So we've tried to get feedback from a lot of people and get input from different sources and use all that information to shape what we've then done. So the next stage after that was to bring together a policy review group. So we've had a group that's been meeting regularly over the last year, and that group is a mixture of people from Church House, some synod staff, and some local church safeguarding coordinators. So they have been able to give advice, look at sort of drafts of documents as we've developed them, feedback, and make sure that we're covering sort of different angles and different perspectives from within the church. And that group has included a representative from Wales to make sure we've covered also the specific issues relating to Wales. So that group has been sort of really central to this process. And then when we've needed to, we've gone to get other specific advice, for example, on legal issues. And then through all that process, we came up with some draft documents, and we've tried to do quite a wide consultation process because we wanted input from as many people across the URC as possible. So we did a two-stage consultation, initially with synod safeguarding staff and the review group. And then over the summer, we had a much wider consultation with documents going out to moderators, synod clerks, SIDOs, some local church representatives, and others from across the URC, so that we had as much input and different ideas and different perspectives as possible. So that is a quick summary of the process that we've been through to make sure that we're including as much relevant information and as many different perspectives from across the church as possible. Okay. Just before I bring in Margaret and Sonia to talk about a little more about that process, I'm just going to highlight 3 questions. These were things that we sort of discussed in the review group, things that we spent a little bit of time thinking about, and they may relate to questions that some people have about the new document. So the first question was, what is it? Which might seem like a silly question, but we spent some time just clarifying what exactly Good Practice 6 is, and came to agreed through discussion with various people that it is a guidance document. It is not in itself a policy. It is guidance to help churches and synods with developing and implementing their own policies. So Good Practice 6, we've made it clear in the text, it is guidance. It is not in itself a policy. The next question, or one of the other questions we considered, is who is it for? And when I first came into the role and looked at Good Practice 5, it seemed that it was aimed at lots of different people and for different audiences. And we had a discussion about, is it worth us keeping one document that covers everyone, or should we perhaps think about having shorter documents for people in different roles? And we came to the conclusion that it was best to keep a document that applies to everyone. So there are some sections which are more relevant for some roles than for others. When you sort of look at it, you might find there are bits that are more relevant to you and other sections which are not. And that's fine. That's how it's been designed. But we decided it was best to keep all the information in one place, and for everyone to be able to see what other people might be doing. So even if some sections might not be directly always relevant to you, it can still be helpful to know what other people's roles are. So we've kept it as a document for everyone to have that openness, that transparency about different roles and responsibilities across the organisation. And the other question we've had quite a debate about is whether to print copies or have material online only. One of the questions in the survey that went out last year was on this question of what people preferred. And there was quite a strong demand from that survey for paper copies still to be available. We've had some discussions about that. Obviously, printing has some environmental implications. There are potential issues with material going out of date. On the other hand, it does make it more accessible for everyone, particularly for those who may be less confident online. So I'm aware there are different, people will have different views on this. But what we've done is to sort of take a combined approach. So the main document will be printed and there will be printed copies coming out to you. But the additional resources will all be online material only. So the printed versions are currently with the printers in the process of being produced. Once those are back, which will be in a few weeks' time, we will start to distribute them. There will be an online version available that should be going live today, hopefully this afternoon. And the resources will be online only. The resources are not all quite sort of formatted, ready to go online, so they will be coming shortly. But the main document should be live sometime today. Okay. So I mentioned the review group that we had, which guided the development of Good Practice 6. And we had 3 representatives from local churches as part of that group. 2 of them are here today, and I'm just going to bring them in at this point and ask them to say a little bit about the process. So Margaret and Sonia. Bear with me. Margaret, thank you. So Margaret and Sonia, thank you very much for being with us today. Can I ask you both just to say briefly a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and your role in your local church? Sonia, would you like to go first?
Yes, no problem. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sonia Wilkes. I am the designated safeguarding coordinator for a lovely little church in Wolverhampton. Lovely people, and as well as being the designated safeguarding coordinator of that church, I'm also the DBS verifier as well. I've been a designated safeguarding coordinator for just over 6 or 7 years, and it's sort of fitted in nicely with my previous job, where I was also a designated safeguarding lead, but this was more for a school. So again, the sort of knowledge that I had from that made it easier and appropriate for me to be the safeguarding coordinator for the church as well. Thank you, Kerry.
Thanks, Sonia. Margaret?
I'm different. I come from the Eastern Synod and I'm a member at Downing Place URC in Cambridge, and I'm retired. And I have to confess that I am no longer the church's safeguarding coordinator. And the reason for this is that I was church secretary from mid-2019 until May of this year, and obviously was therefore responsible for submitting DBS checks. Halfway through that 4-year period, the elder responsible for safeguarding in the congregation asked to stand down. We tried to recruit, had no success, so I volunteered. And that's how I came to get involved.
Okay, thanks you, Margaret. And then can I ask you both, sort of what was it that led you to offer to help us out with the review of Good Practice 6, and why did you sort of want to help with that? And what difference do you think it's made the process and to the group to have you, and we had one other as well, representative, to have that input from local churches on the group. Margaret, do you want to go first this time?
Yeah, okay. Well, having come from that background, I got a sense of the bigger picture, particularly the links between the local congregation, the synod and the denomination as a whole. In addition, I had been a representative from the synod on the URC Trust and knew of the concerns that all denominations have had to address after the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, which we have had reference to, but of course GP6 is broader than that. I thought, well, I've got a little bit of experience. I'll see whether I can offer anything. I didn't expect to be included, but it happened. And so that's where I ended up, along with the other people that you mentioned.
Yeah, thank you. And Sonia?
Yes, again, slightly different from Margaret, actually. So like a lot of people, I completed the online survey. I like completing surveys, but at the end of this one, there was no holiday or free food, or, when you do these surveys and you get all this sort of thing, there was something actually better. It gave me the opportunity to be involved in something where I've had my say. Again, I thought that my knowledge of being a safeguarding lead in a school which I'd been doing for quite a long time, I was interested to hear how the whole process came together, because we only sort of see a snapshot of it within the local church. Obviously, I'd used GP 4 and 5, to be honest, but I felt that the sections, and I know, Kerry, you've alluded to it as well, but there were certain sections that you went to quite a lot for sort of information and you became familiar with, like the recording of the concerns, looking into concerns, etc. But there were also the other areas that, for my own knowledge, I wanted a bit more information as to what happened there and how the local churches could be a part of that. So it goes back to what we've always said, where safeguarding is for everyone. I felt that being involved in this process was key to the overall GP6 being developed in the way that it could be used for everyone. And any small part that I could put in there, I felt quite honoured to be involved in that.
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you, Margaret. It's been really helpful to have your input and have that local church perspective as we've been developing it. And just final question is whether you have any kind of comments or suggestions of how this could be helpful for local churches, because it can look a bit daunting. Do you have anything that you would say, sort of advice or suggestions for local churches on how to use the new document when it comes out?
Yeah, what I would say, and again, Kerry, you mentioned it is quite daunting when you actually look at it, but it's really how you sort of approach it. And the way that I looked at it was, rather than a huge document containing XYZ pages, it's looking at it as a handbook with different sections. So it's just separate parts appropriate to whatever concern that you wanted to be involved in. And also the diagrams and the way that it's explained is far more user friendly than what we've had in GP4 and GP5. Now, because of the different types of people that have been are going to be using it, again, the wording, the terminology, etc., it needed to be something that was everybody could identify with. What I quite like about it as well, we're all busy, we've all got busy things going on in our lives. So I actually found the guidance leaflets, if you just want a quick reference as to, right, something's just come up and I just want to quickly find out how to deal with that. it could be used. But the thing is, it can be used for anyone in the church. It's not just specifically for the designated safeguarding coordinator. And I think that's the thing as well, is that it's not seen as just a guide for the designated safeguarding coordinator. We say that safeguarding is for everyone, and we've made the GP6 for everyone.
Okay, thank you. And Margaret?
I would certainly back what Sonia has said myself, and refer back to Adrian's introduction, that it builds on what the URC has been working to instill as good practice over a considerable length of time. But we can always learn new things. And I'm particularly impressed by the linking of activities and values with responses of concern and support for people who've experienced abuse and the management of risk. And the little circles do just highlight what are the basics about belonging to a denomination that has a culture of care. I think that's the really important thing. It may seem very long, even though it's been cut down in some respects from what was in GP5. But checking out the resources is one way through with the various templates. It will be time well spent. And I think the other thing to emphasize is that the synod safeguarding officer, whichever synod you belong to, is only an email or a telephone call away. Don't try and do things on your own. You've got people that you can talk to.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Sonia. That's been really helpful. And that leads us into just the next section that I wanted to talk through, which is how we use Good Practice 6. So there will be postal copies coming in the post to all churches. Sometime those will be starting to go out in November. The online version is live from today. So as you start to look at it and become familiar with it, how can we then sort of use it most effectively in practice? And we're not expecting people to suddenly start rewriting everything, because a lot of the, as I mentioned at the beginning, a lot of the core principles are the same. So it's not a case of suddenly having to rewrite everything, but it's looking at kind of what's there and how we can incorporate new things, how we can keep improving. And obviously everyone is working in a different context with different levels of resources and different experience. So it's a case of working out, what makes sense and what works for you in your particular context. But there are 3 questions that I think can help in terms of thinking about how to apply it in practice. And these questions are in the document itself, so you will see them when you get the copies. But the first one is to think about, how do we use Good Practice 6 to help embed good practice in the regular routines of our church life, our work, to help prevent harm from occurring? And part of the thinking behind this sort of question, this topic, was when we did the online survey last year. One of the questions was, asking for feedback on Good Practice 5, and a number of people made comments to the effect of, well, I haven't read it very much because there are no concerns to deal with in my church at the moment. And that response came up quite a lot, and it was something that we were a little sort of concerned about, that people thought the document was only there for when a problem comes up. And actually, it isn't. There are things that we want to build into good practice that are happening all the time. So the 2 sections of Good Practice 6 which are most relevant to this particular question are those 2 which are highlighted there: safer culture and safer activities. So things like having policies, people doing training, making sure activities are carefully planned, all those kinds of things It's good for those to be built into, embedded in, sort of regular church life, even if there's no specific concern or allegation going on. Those activities, those things in those two highlighted sections there are things that are to think about kind of all the time. So embedding that into church life as a sort of regular routine part of what we do. So those two sections are particularly focused on, on that question. Then we have the question, how can we use good practice 6 to improve how we respond when a concern or an allegation does come up? Because even if we are making really good progress with safer culture and safer activities, there are still going to be problems at some point, because that is the nature of human life. So when a concern does come up, how can we make sure that we are responding in the most effective way? We need to comply with legal responsibilities, but we also want to make sure that we're providing care for anyone who's involved. So the two sections of Good Practice 6 that help the most with that question are the two highlighted there: recognising and responding to the concerns, and managing allegations when they come up. So those two are the sections to look at specifically when these kind of situations arise. And then thirdly, how can we use GP6 to better support people who have experienced harm or abuse? And we have that particular chapter focused on that specific question. So I hope those three questions illustrate sort of different features of the guidance. So we have sections which are there to be used all the time. It's a regular routine part of life. And then there are other sections that you might use more when particular situations crop up and there are particular circumstances that you need to deal with. So different parts of the guidance will be useful at different times, and then those first two sections are there kind of all the time to be sort of regular and routine. So I hope that gives an indication of how to potentially use the document. And it may be we're not expecting people to take everything on board all at once. It might be, for example, a good idea to start with one of those questions and work through that and then move on to the others. And as you get familiar with the document, think about it in those terms of how can we do those different things. And then lastly and briefly, just to talk about what happens next. So we have Good Practice 6. One day there'll be Good Practice 7, but not for a little while. But what we will do is keep all this under review. Obviously, new things will come up, whether that's new topics, things around technology, for example, and how that has implications for safeguarding. There will be new things that we need to add. If you have feedback and suggestions, once you get a chance to look at Good Practice 6, then please do feed those through either to Synod, safeguarding officers, or directly to the team at Church House. We will obviously be keeping an eye on legislation and guidance and keeping a list of all the things that will need updating in due course. We will also need to update related documents. So there are a number of things that currently relate to mention Good Practice 5, and we'll gradually need to change those to reflect Good Practice 6. Some of the training programs will need some tweaks to incorporate Good Practice 6. So that will all be sort of ongoing in the background over the next sort of months until we get to a point where we need to do some updates. Having done a big restructure and big rewrite for Good Practice 6, we don't anticipate needing to do any sort of big further rewrites. It's likely to be more adding things, tweaking things, tidying up, and just taking account of any changes that come in that we need to take account of. As I mentioned earlier, all the future updates are likely to be online only. So this will be the last one that comes out in hard copy, and the future updates are likely to be online. But please we do welcome feedback, we do welcome suggestions. So if you have comments, then please do feed them through, and we will keep them on a list for when we need to review and update in the future. But I hope that's given a good sort of overview of what good practice looks like, why we've made some of the changes that we have, and some of the ways that you can think about using it and starting to apply it in whatever context you're currently in. And just as we finish, I've put here a quote. John Bradbury has kindly written an introduction for Good Practice 6, and this is a quote from that introduction that he's provided for us. And I've put this here because it's a good reminder, I think as Margaret said and Adrian earlier, that this is something we do together. None of us can do it on our own. It is a collective effort, and so it's important to remember that. And to highlight that last line there, there is always someone to turn to for help, guidance and support. So please do contact, Synod, safeguarding officers, or the church house team, and people will be very happy to provide that help and guidance and support. I'm going to stop there and say thank you for your time. Thank you for your interest in Good Practice 6. We hope you find it helpful and a useful resource. And we've put the web link there for the relevant page on the website, and material will start to appear there. Some of it will be there today, and then the additional resources will be coming over the next few weeks, and gradually that page will fill up with all the material. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand over now. I'm going to hand over to Carrie, who is our training coordinator. And she is just going to give a brief update before the break on some new e-learning material. Sharon or Emma, could you spotlight Carrie? My screen has changed.
Yeah, that's not me that's being spotlighted. That's the other safeguarding. Apologies to everybody. I've had some technical difficulties this afternoon, which is why your recording potentially stopped and started again, because my computer kindly kicked me out of Zoom. So I'm not quite sure what's happening there, because that's not me that's being spotlighted, it's the safeguarding.
You're spotlighted now, Carrie.
Perfect, there we go. Hello, thank you very much. So yes, apologies for the technical difficulties this afternoon. We've had some glitches with people's cameras. We've had recording stopping and starting, and then that. So please bear with us. The joys of technology. It's great when it works, not so much when it doesn't. Also, just a reminder that we have had to mute the chat function today. So we aren't taking direct questions, although I'm sure you will have some. If you do have questions, then please can you email us to the safeguarding inbox. That's safeguarding@urc.org.uk, and somebody from the Church House safeguarding team will respond to that. Unfortunately, there's just too many people in today to be able to take direct questions. So as Kerry said, I'm the training and development coordinator for safeguarding. So I'm responsible for developing all of the safeguarding training that you receive through your Synod safeguarding officers, and also via myself from Church House, because I do deliver quite a lot now. But we also have e-learning available for you. So our foundation training, our foundation level safeguarding training is available as an e-learning package, and it's been available as an e-learning package for about 18 months. So I'm hoping that most people are aware of that. But if you're not, this is your information about that. But we are actually relaunching that today as we relaunch Good Practice, or launch Good Practice 6. So we have taken our foundation e-learning and put it onto a new platform, which should be a lot more interactive. It's a lot nicer to navigate through, and it should be very straightforward to navigate through. So I'm going to share my screen with you today so you can see what that will look like. The link for that will be going out to everybody next week in our newsletter. So we send out a quarterly newsletter from the safeguarding team that gets sent to all church safeguarding coordinators. So if you haven't seen that, please check your inboxes, because that does come out quarterly. If you haven't received it, then please do let Emma know at Church House, and we can make sure that the relevant person gets that information and that you get hold of that newsletter. We also make sure that it's available on our website. So if you want to look at any past newsletters or the next one when it comes out, you can also go to the safeguarding area of the URC website. And once the link goes out for the new e-learning on the newsletter, it will also have its own space on the website. So anybody who needs foundation level e-learning can access that via the URC website. Your synods will also have that link and potentially will embed that into their own website. So you may be able to find it on the synod website. There will be plenty of options and ways to get that. If you can't find that link for whatever reason, then please contact your synod safeguarding officer and they will be able to send that out to you. So once we've got that new link, it will be available from next week. So I'm going to share my screen just for a few moments so you can see exactly what it will look like, and just give you a little bit of a guide as to how that will work. So this is the platform. At the moment, I've only got it in review form on the website because the link hasn't been fully generated yet. As you can see down the left-hand side, there is a menu, and this takes you to all the different pages and all the different elements of that training. So there's quite a lot of them, but some of them we'll get through very, very quickly. And once you click onto a slide, it will tick to say that you've done it so that you can see exactly where you're up to in the training. If you leave the training and want to come back at any point, then it will show you exactly where you are. So Good Practice 6 has now been updated into our foundation training, so you can see that. Most of the slides are interactive. There's lots of quizzes and questions and things as you go. And as there was before, there's the final test at the end, which will generate your certificate. The training is narrated all the way through. So if you need the narration, then you don't have to read all the slides. It will talk to you, but you can mute that if you don't want to hear. Unfortunately, it's my dulcet tones that you will hear. So apologies for that. A lovely northern accent coming through that training, but you can mute that. So it should be pretty easy to navigate through. The slides will not let you progress if you haven't completed certain elements of them. So the slides that are interactive, where there are quizzes and questions to answer, so such as this one, what do you think safeguarding is? It would not let you continue to the next slide until you answer that. But it should be pretty self-explanatory and pretty straightforward to navigate through that. If there are any difficulties when people do come in to do it, then you can email me either through that safeguarding inbox or my email address, which is carrie.kaunda, which is KAUNDA @urc.org.uk. And all of those details will be on the newsletter with the link. So I do hope you make use of that within your churches. If your foundation level safeguarding is due for renewal, then please utilise the e-learning. There are some synods that prefer you to do in person or face-to-face. If you are in one of those synods, your synod safeguarding officer will speak to you about how that works. But the majority of people are now using the e-learning. I know that a lot of synods are still offering in-person and Zoom foundation alongside this. So this isn't your only option, but it is there. It means that you don't have to wait for a training session to come available or for a date to be released. You can do this at any time in your own time. If you've got people in your church that may be struggling because they don't have the technology or they're nervous about using technology, we totally understand that. If you want to get a group of people together to do this around one laptop, then that's absolutely fine. We would encourage you to do that. You can fill in the form at the end multiple times to generate the certificates for everybody. So you can do this collectively as a group within your church if that works for you. It's about utilising it in whatever way it fits. So that's our foundation training. There's not much more I need to say about that. Like I said, the details will be in the newsletter, which will come out to you next week. The other thing that I want to share is the national training dates that we have for next year. So alongside our training framework, which tells you the foundation, the intermediate and the advanced training, which have been mandated by General Assembly, we also now offer a range of bespoke training. So we have various dates, and if you go to this part of the website, you will be able to see those training dates there. Just click there and it will bring up the flyer, which lists, oh, that's the wrong flyer, clusters. It will list the right one. See, I told you I'm having fun with technology today. Hopefully this one takes you to the right one. No, it's not updated. This is last year's. But if you click on there, it has, hopefully it will have updated by the end of today. You will see a whole list of training dates, and these are this year's, but next year we have a variety of different training, such as modern slavery, safeguarding for ministers supporting survivors, safeguarding for elders supporting survivors. We've got safeguarding for refugees and asylum seekers, substance abuse. There is a whole range of different options. If you are interested in any of that training, I have updated it this morning, and I know that the actual live website is running fine and those dates are on there. Like I said, I seem to be having a technical day. I think this has gone into the web builder rather than the actual website, which is why it's showing you this. But you can see all of those dates as of today. If you want to book onto any of those, it's a case of emailing Emma. And again, the link to this flyer and the information about that will be in the newsletter. Please do circulate this around your churches. You may have people that have interest in different areas of safeguarding. We know that sometimes safeguarding isn't at the top of people's thinking in churches, but there may be certain elements that people have a specific interest in. Those sessions will be run as webinars, and there will be no cap on the numbers of people that can attend them next year. So if you are interested in attending those, then they will be open to as many people as want to attend. Please do circulate that throughout your churches, like I said, because it's not just training for safeguarding coordinators or elders or ministers or people with a role. It may be that you have general congregation members who wish to attend some of that training. And the more people that have that training, the more we have conversations about safeguarding, the more we will create cultures where we create safer spaces in our churches. And like we've said today, and just to reiterate the message, I'm going to stop my screen now. It's not just about responding to disclosures. It's about being able to create safe spaces and cultures within our churches where people feel that safeguarding is taken seriously and they will be listened to and responded to. So those trainings may just spark interest or spark a conversation, and it's about having that dialogue going in your churches. So they're the three things that I needed to highlight today. So the foundation training, the newsletter, please look out for that, and those training dates for 2024, which I assure you, if you look at the website, they are definitely there now. I think that that's all I need to say before we go for a break. After our break, I will be welcoming Leroy Logan to discuss with you, and hopefully we won't have as many technical issues with that. He's a lovely man. I've had some great conversations with him in the run up to this, and he's got some really interesting things to discuss with us today. So thank you for your time listening to that about training. Like I said, if you have any queries or additional comments about training, then you can email me after today. Thank you.
So we're going to have got an extra 5 minutes of a break. So we're going to rejoin together at 3 o'clock. So you've got 20 minutes. Go and grab yourself a cuppa, have a break away from your screen. And if you want to turn your cameras off, you're already muted, so we won't hear what's going on for you in your break. But we'll see you back here at 3 o'clock, and Carrie will be leading the session with Leroy at 3. Thanks, everyone. the break. Thank you. With that, Carrie's going to lead with Leroy, who's just arrived, and I think he's probably a bit flustered because he's sat in a station. Is it Paddington? I think I just read. Had having train issues, so I guess he's stuck trying to get home or get somewhere quiet. But I'll leave Carrie and Leroy to introduce their session. Carrie, are you good?
Are you unmuted? No, you're still muted. we're doing well with technology today, I tell you.
We can hear you, Carrie, and shall I pin Leroy as well now?
I had pinned him.
Oh.
There we go. Oh, I think that's both of us. Both are muted, both spotlighted. Can you hear me, Leroy? Leroy, yep. Can you hear me? Oh, wonderful.
Yep, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Brilliant. We got there in the end.
Great.
Oh, good things come to those that wait. Thank you so much for being here with us this afternoon. We really do appreciate it. I understand you've had a bit of a train nightmare because the trains have been delayed. The joys of the rail. But thank you so much. So it's with great pleasure that I introduce Leroy this afternoon. Leroy was both a founding member of the Black Police Association and its chairman for 30 years. His life's been dramatised in Red, White and Blue, which was directed by Steve McQueen and still available on BBC iPlayer. I would highly recommend it. He's also written a book called Closing Ranks, My Life as a Cop, which describes his time as a senior police officer in London. Again, I would highly recommend that read. I'm partway through it myself now. So we're delighted to welcome Leroy here today to talk about his own experiences and shed some further light on how injustice and preconceptions can shape people's responses in aspects such as safeguarding. So, Leroy, can you start by telling us a bit more about your background and why you've dedicated your life to the causes that you have?
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, I'm a Londoner, born and bred. I'm a gooner at that, so if there's any long-suffering Arsenal supporters, you'll identify with my ups and downs in football. But no, yeah, and I'm there in Islington. In fact, it was my first police station when I joined the Met in '83. I did 30 years, and during that time, as you've already heard, I have been addressing the injustices and inequalities within the Met, which is a tough ask, and it's a continuous ongoing process because I'm still involved in it now. And in fact, I was a founder member and co-chair of the Met and National BPA. In fact, I've just left the National BPA 25th anniversary AGM in Cardiff, and that's one of the reasons why I was stuck on a train inadvertently. And yeah, I'm really pleased to be here and just to share my story, just like other people's stories, very valuable. And hopefully my sort of lived experience can help people to know what they need to do, especially in really challenging issues, including safeguarding.
So you've had a lot of experience of injustice in your life and how people's perceptions can really impact their actions. And we know, and it's something that we really recognise, that it's very difficult for people to acknowledge that they have bias. But we all have bias, don't we? We all have prejudices, and it is difficult to acknowledge that. But a lot of it's linked to how we were brought up and our own experiences. So in your experience, what are the key things that can hold people back and can support them to create bias or to hold on to those biases and their prejudice and therefore not speak out? What do you think are the key things that hold people back?
Well, I think one of the things is how you approach these things for biases and prejudices. I mean, it's inbuilt that we have that, and acknowledging it as a process of learning and understanding how you fit in and how you relate to other people, I think is the key part of the equation. So don't see it as a fault. Don't see it as something that's held against you, because we all will approach things not knowing the full context of that person, that situation, and so it's not a weakness not to have all the information, and it's good to question your own thinking, and also to see, well, in trying to find out more and understanding your own preferences that can lead to prejudices or any form of ism, is to see it as a learning process, and not knowing is a good thing. It's when you don't know what you don't know is the problem, and you're in some form of denial and the thinking that, oh, I know everything, and I'm well informed, so no one can tell me anything. It's when you believe you have nothing to learn and you have all the information that you need, that it can give you that sort of myopia, that very sort of tunnel vision, and not embracing other circumstances or information that can assist in your learning. So that's how I've put it across, that we're all in that position. We all need to learn, and it's an ongoing process. It doesn't stop at a certain age or a certain level of responsibility or a certain exposure to certain jobs or roles or authority levels. We're all in the same boat, and it's one of life's questions. But we all have to keep learning and knowing each other as best we can, and that's how I was able to bring forward certain strategies in the Met, because they don't celebrate diversity. A lot of them don't really understand it because they come from quite restricted, I would say, communities. So if they come from outside London, London is a massive place. It's so culturally rich and diverse that if they're not really embracing it, they're going to see it as a threat, and they're going to see it as a weakness, and something that they have to ignore and maybe be in denial. So that's I think the really interesting thing is to ensure that people are coming with you. And it's not just about the minority groups who are the victim of any system. It's a rainbow coalition, I call it. You have to have all people involved, because it doesn't matter what your experience is, your journey is, you all have a role to play.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it's really key to note that we've seen that people can be scared to speak out about safeguarding concerns, and that might be linked to certain biases they have or certain thinking that they hold, especially around people in the church. And when we've chatted before, you've mentioned about people being complicit in their silence and how not speaking out, it makes you complicit. So would you be able to expand a little bit more on that? We've had that conversation before. Just give us an insight into how you feel the church can advocate against that and just support people to speak out when they see things that are challenging, or they see things that they don't like or that they feel are wrong, and really make a step out that will help us to support safeguarding.
Well, the church is very similar to policing. You have your strong culture. I would like to think the issues of discernment helps you to map your way through the pluses and minuses of that. And also, as public servants in the church, like police, you will have certain specialist units, areas where people are less open or exposed to the public, and it's sometimes, the public interface gives you a lot more accountability and transparency, because you're dealing with the public. They're going to expect that and they want to have an input and they want to feel involved. Whereas in the subcultures, they can be that sort of, well, less exposure to the public. There's the nuances of a subculture in those specialist units, and as a result of that, it can be less accountable and transparent. It can be seen to be elitist. It can be seen to be distant, and it can be seen to really be in denial of what's going on at the public interface, and not really acknowledging and responding to issues that the public are crying out for, you know. And, you know, when you've got that spiritual dimension, especially with churches, I think it's something that you have to keep a real watchful eye on, and be able to call the individuals who are not being clear on their roles and responsibilities, not only to the public, but how they interface with their colleagues. And there has to be a positive culture where people believe they can call this out without being ostracized or seen to be betraying colleagues. To have a good whistleblowing strategy is key to ensure that people feel they can call out bad behavior or inappropriate actions without feeling ostracized, so that people will call out and speak out. It's when you don't speak out, then you become complicit by your silence. And I've seen that so many times in the police. I reflected that in my book, where everyone wants you to be compliant, fitting in with the culture, and not challenging it. And if you do challenge it, you're seen as betraying. And it's because I actually want to improve the culture. I want to improve service to the public. It has to be allowed to call things out. I might be seen as, you know, a Judas, whatever they want to call me, amongst other things. But I see myself as the person who will open things out, and I'm pleased that there are a lot more people wanting to do that nowadays, because they see the organization improving, and you're not going to get that turnover of staff, because if people are suffering in silence, they're going to leave and they're going to vote with their feet. So you want to keep hold of people. You want to develop those who have got these prejudices and these sort of subcultures that can be detrimental to the organization. And you don't want to be falling short of your mark of what you believe is important to your organization. So it's really important to have people clear on their role within themselves as colleagues, and also to feel safe that if they call things out, they're going to be supported.
Yeah, definitely. And you talked there a bit about betraying the culture and the organisation, and I think people have that concern and that worry in churches that they could be seen to be betraying their church or their colleagues in the church if they speak out against injustice or a safeguarding concern or a concern of any nature of someone's behaviour. But you talk a lot in your book about your faith and how that guided you through, and how that gave you the courage and conviction to speak out against the systems you found yourself working in. So how did your faith guide you and help you to stand up against injustice? Because you suffered some real personal challenges, and both professionally, emotionally, it was very difficult. So how did your faith guide you in that?
Well, it was a main anchor. I don't think I'd have lasted 3 weeks, much less 30 years. It made it very easy for me because I had my clear red lines that I wasn't going to buy into misplaced loyalties. I wasn't going to assimilate into the culture and accept things that I believe was inappropriate, unprofessional. And once you make it clear to your colleagues, they're not going to do things in front of you, especially when you're a supervisor. They know, no, don't do it in front of Leroy, because he's not that way going to just buy into things. And as a supervisor, very clear. I'll try and develop people, let them know where I stand on things. So my faith was extremely helpful. I know a lot of people say, oh, you know, being a Christian in the police is a tough thing. Oh, how did you survive? For me, it was an advantage, especially when you're being challenged, when you're getting tough time, whether operationally, maybe, you know, you have to manage your own expectations. I fell short the mark when it came to assessment centres or promotion, an operation, dealing with an incident might not have gone according to plan, but and if it was a real sense of, oh, I could have done a lot better, I found that my faith really helped me to do that self-reflection, to do that discernment, to do that real sort of calling on the Lord and saying, you know, just assist me. And every time I call on him, he did. And he still does, even in public service since I retired 10 years ago in 2013. So for me, it's something that gave me that transformative form of leadership, understanding that I'm just as you know, fault-ridden like everyone else. So I'm not going to take myself too seriously. You know, I'm not going to judge people because God is the judge. So, but I'll do what I need to do to be firm but fair and open and get the best out of people and be a good leader. So for me, I know showing faith in action as well for the community was a real advantage when they saw the practical aspects of my faith, working to make better community relations, working to make them feel safer and secure by the strategies I brought in to get the perpetrators of crime and violence in the community, and really giving people confidence to say, well, listen, they are valued and they're able to be a key part of what we're trying to do for the public. So for me, it was all encompassing. It was very practical, and that faith in action still walks with me now.
I mean, your convictions must have really supported a different type of culture in the police. I mean, we hear about the culture within the police force, but the way your convictions and the way you stood out for your faith must have really impacted the people around you. And that's one thing that we're really keen as a safeguarding team, to help churches to develop cultures where people feel safe and feel listened to and feel acknowledged. So how do you think that we could support churches to develop that culture where we can create a safer space for people?
Well, very similar to the police. You need to ensure that everything that you do is open to scrutiny. It's when you feel that you have to hide things. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I call my book Close the Ranks. It's invariably close the ranks at the expense of truth and justice. And the perceptions are very strong. When the public believe that you know, you're delaying things, or you're not coming out with consistent information, or you tend to be saying nothing, they think, well, you've got something to hide. And sometimes the issue is minor compared to the sense of closing ranks, the sense of being in denial, the sense of not wanting to acknowledge that something has gone wrong. So I find that it's really important to see things in the round, especially the public. I can't emphasize enough. They need to feel involved. I mean, we've had some really critical incidences, even as recently as in policing, recently as last month, where firearms officers felt betrayed by the fact that one of their own was going to court for the killing of a man in a car called Chris Cabba. Now, we just have to understand that we have a one-tier legal system. What's illegal for one is illegal for all. And if there is a doubt around the legality, everyone has to be put before the courts. I mean, that's part of jurisprudence. That's law and order. That's what we have a God of order and purpose. And so, as orderly and purposeful people, we need to comply with that. And what saddened me is how other officers were being saying it's disloyal for me to call out their protest in want to not use their firearms at parliamentary purposes and iconic sites. And I thought to myself, why am I being disloyal by saying we all have to be scrutinized, especially when you have high responsibility, high authority. And the higher authority you have, the more responsible you've got to be, the more accountable you should be, the more transparent you should be. And those officers really ostracized me in a way that I thought, wow, I must be touching a nerve. And for me, that's a good indicator of where I need to focus my efforts. And I think any leader where he or she sees that there are issues in your organization that needs to be addressed, and it does create a reaction. Don't step away from that. Don't feel, oh, I don't want to upset my colleagues. You really need to go into that situation. It's when you are proactive and you spot these early interventions and preventions to assist in preventing things becoming a real issue. Spot those risks and mitigating them before they become a problem for the organization. It's very, very key to be very nimble, very agile, very got your, I call it my spiritual antennae, really spotting these things before they become a problem. And I think that for me is key for any leader. They can't rely on just being in their office. They've got to be proactive. They've got to see how their strategy is playing itself out. It's not just about outputs and numbers. It's around outcomes and life-changing experiences.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting what you say about the police force, and I can see a lot of parallels with the church in terms of holding leaders on a pedestal, and there does need to be accountability. But we may have people here today who are wondering, how does this relate to the church? You're talking about the police force, and we're coming at this from a church point of view. And how do you think that we can see the parallels between what's happening in the police force and things in the church? Because I think one of the things that we really are trying to work against is people still having this feeling that, well, that wouldn't happen in the church because there may be corruption in the police force, it's the police, but that wouldn't happen in the church. And yet we've seen from past cases that things do happen in the church. So what would you say to people that are saying, well, it wouldn't happen here? Do you have any words of wisdom?
Well, denial is one of the biggest barriers for progress. You've got to understand that it can happen anywhere, any organization. We've seen it in church culture going back hundreds of years, that inappropriate behavior and the way in which certain perpetrators have been protected and not being fully investigated and being exonerated without any sort of due process. So if there's that sense that, oh, we take care of our own, well, it's just like police. Unfortunately, that's what happens. Remember, we're in a people business. Maybe in terms of police, they're more regulators, whereas in the church, it's more spiritual guidance and a more intimate relationship, because the church is there in so many key parts of our lives, and you cannot underestimate it, but it's still people, relationships, and understanding the importance of those relationships, and not abusing one's authority in those relationships. So denial for me is one of the biggest barriers, and we cannot allow ourselves to think it can never happen to church. Okay, it might not be as dramatic or graphic as you see in the police, but it can be, because you're dealing with people. We're negative by nature since the fall. So it is something that we can all fall short of mark. And, you know, I just don't think we can allow ourselves to say God's anointed is absolved of that. Unfortunately, it can catch people on the blind side and they don't realize it. I've had the good fortune of working with some great people, excellent leaders, and it doesn't mean they don't make mistakes, and life-changing ones at that. So I know you've got to be on top of your game. For me, it's not only physically and psychologically, but spiritually. You've got to be as open to the good, bad, and the indifferent. You know that there's always areas for improvement, and always a way in which you can do things better for you, your team, your pastoral team, for the congregations, and not allow gaps to emerge between the local delivery and the central strategy. You've got to keep it very interoperable, as I say. It has to be connected, it has to be joined up, it has to be fit for purpose. And you only do that through proper consultation, review, and verification of what you're doing. And you know, one of the things my wife says to me, you say you love me, show me you love me. Well, one way of doing that in the work that we do is to have the right resources, the culturally competent personnel to assist with delivering that strategy, whether it's an action plan or dealing with the ethos of the organization. It has to have properly resourced people with that cultural competence to ensure it is fit for purpose.
That's brilliant, thank you. I mean, so we can accept and we can acknowledge that abuse and safeguarding concerns can happen within the church, but in reality, we know that it's still very, very challenging for people to talk about that, especially in churches where people are very close, the relationships are like family. I know that from my own experience. So what would you say to people that are trying to find the courage to speak out on specific issues or things that they found concerning? You speak a lot about your own courage in your book, and you obviously have had a lot of courage in your life. So where do you find that courage from?
Well, having great family, great fellowship. I've still got my friends that I went to school with. They are really great people to just bounce things by and make me clear on what I need to do. Sometimes I get just as much information from my mate who's a plumber or electrician as I do from people who are in the organization with me. So a very different perspective can be very helpful. I'm blessed with a great wife. She's celebrated our 40th wedding anniversary. So, you know, she had been with me through thick and thin, even before I joined the police service. So I know the importance of choosing your friends wisely, having the right sort of fellowship, and not being, you know, negative by nature. I'm positive by nature. I always see the glasses half full. I try and until I'm instructed otherwise or understand otherwise, I'm going to give people the benefit of the doubt. I can change that situation, or they can have a positive input on other people, including myself. I've never had a problem where I think I'm not going to get the best out of that person. I'm patient. You know, I wait on the Lord to give me that sort of advice. I don't like to react in haste and suffer in leisure. So at times, if that situation will allow, you know, I'll give time and consideration and reflection on that situation and how I can improve. So it's really just anchoring yourself in the word, in what you do, and be encouraged by seeing how the Lord can have an impact in a practical situation. As I said before, faith in action. I remember one example or a theme throughout my career is sometimes I feel I'm an imposter. I shouldn't be at that meeting. When I was national chair of the Black Police Association, I would think, oh, well, why am I in this position? What have I got to say? I've got nothing to say. And in the end, I found calling on the Lord, saying, dispatching his angels ahead of me, make that holy ground. I'm not going to be out my depth. I am going to have a word in season. I am going to be part of the solutions and never fail. And I'm just thinking, where did that come from? It's not of me. And I just give glory to God for that. Because I suppose my book, Close Your Ranks, it's God's glory through the story. And I'm glad that the story has been picked up by Steve McQueen in his film. And it's still on iPlayer. And in fact, they screened it in the Met Police last Thursday as part of the Black History Month. Now, for them to screen that film about me, who's sometimes seen as public enemy number one, especially when they try to investigate me, and I got compensated 6 figures, it means a lot. So I know this progress and be encouraged by progress, and not to just bypass it and think, oh, the glass is still half empty. No. If you really look and analyze things, you will see improvements. And that's what encourages me. Sometimes we get disappointed. We can't be discouraged. We've got to keep going. That's why I'm not chilling on a beach somewhere in Africa or the Caribbean, believing that, I've done my bit. No, it's still important to keep your hand to the plow. And I also see that my grandchildren's generation needs to have, improvement in their lives. I don't want my grandchildren's generation to be subject to the injustices my children's generation has gone through, my generation, my parents' generation. We've got to see changes for the better and sustainably at that. So that's what encourages me, and that's what keeps me anchored and just determined to keep going. As long as I've got health and strength, I'll keep going.
Brilliant. Finally, what do you think God is saying to us as we move forward and try and strengthen our response to safeguarding concerns? You've spoken a lot there about progression. Hopefully we're seeing progress and we're seeing people speak out more about injustice. Do you think we're making enough progress? How do you think we can make more progress to strengthen our response to this?
Well, I think I know that you're launching your good practice guide, and the things that you are bringing forward are practical and everyone can understand what you're trying to do. So, being salt and light, being progressive, being innovative, you can be in the world, but not of the world. So it's great to see churches like URC is setting a tone and bringing in expertise where you think, oh, maybe years ago it wouldn't be brought in. I think those sort of non-church expertise is just as important as what's in the church. And don't underestimate where people can bring in real innovation. I know there's certain doctrines and certain ways of operating in the church can be seen, well, it's going back decades and centuries, but like everything, I think you have to be radical, you have to be progressive, and I'm not saying to be reckless, I'm not saying to be just outlandish. I'm seen as a bit of a maverick because I will take steps and informed steps to make changes and not just discount things because it's playing safe. Sometimes you have to step outside the comfort zone, be in the eye of the storm to make the changes and see, you know, how God works with you, and really pushes things in a way that you think, wow, we just give him the glory and what he's doing, and you know, and not looking at it as you want to get self-promotion or, you know, self-aggrandizement. You need to know that you're doing it for the kingdom. You're doing it for improvement in the church, knowing that it should be the basis or the fulcrum of the community. Where churches are seen to be self-serving in their own four walls, it doesn't last. It needs to be out there, the center of the community, and being relevant and real to those who need those questions answered. It's, you know, the church has good news. Let's share that news.
Thank you. I think that's a brilliant way to end there. Thank you. It's been fantastic to have you with us today, and we really appreciate, especially coming in from Paddington Station. I hope you get safely today and can get on the train. Yeah, I think I would extend the thanks from everyone at the URC from being here today and just sharing some really useful insights. It's been great. So thank you very much. I will let you go and get a train.
Okay, but I just want to say thanks for the invitation. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you, even though it's online, and just thank you for your approach, Carrie. You know, it's been really useful in preparation for this, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your conference.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Okay.
Bye, Leroy.
You too. Bye.
So I will now hand back to Sharon, and she's got some closing comments. I hope you all enjoyed that as much as I did. He had some fantastic insights there. Yeah, I'll pass you back to Sharon now.
Thanks, Carrie. It was really good to hear some positive affirmation there from Leroy about Good Practice 6 and what the purpose of it is and how it fits in with the bigger picture of safeguarding people in our church and giving people the encouragement to speak out if they use Good Practice 6 and the guidance that's in there. So thanks, Leroy, for that. I think he might have gone already. So just to close off today's session a bit earlier, which is always good to give people the gift of time. I just wanted to say, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone today that's joined us as a speaker. So to Adrian, Sonia, Margaret and Leroy, it's been really great to have a range of people joining us today. And also thank you to the safeguarding team at Church House who've helped put the event together. So Kerry and Carrie for leading their sessions, and Emma for all the administrative and technical support she's given as well. And it's been good sort of to come together and for you to all attend as well, to hear about safeguarding and how it fits into the church and is a key component to everything that we do today. And as Adrian and others have said, it isn't a compliance issue. If we're a church that care, then we want people to be safe in our churches and to be safeguarded. I really hope that wherever you go back to, if you'll hear from a local church or hear from a team or your own workplace, that there's something that you've learned or you've heard today that you can go back and share with others that you come across, and remind them that the recording of today's session will be online at some point shortly, and once we've done some editing of it. And you've met the Church House safeguarding team today, but remember that you've also in synods, you've got your synod safeguarding officers, and in your local churches you should have a church safeguarding coordinator who are all available to talk to you about safeguarding if you need it. So just a reminder, Good Practice 6 will be online today. We hope we don't crash the URC website after, with everyone quickly accessing Good Practice 6. And as Kerry said, it's at the printers, so you should be getting a copy on your church doorstep in November once we've packaged them up and posted them out to everyone, and that the e-learning foundation course has been revamped and will be out with the link to that in the newsletter next week. So just to close, I wanted to remind people, if you weren't aware, that annually there's a date in November which is allocated to Safeguarding Sunday, and this year it's on the 19th of November. And if your church doesn't, I would encourage them to use this date to raise awareness of safeguarding, to create a culture in your church that safeguarding's spoken about. 318 produce resources for that day. They have service plans, children's activities, and this year the URC has produced some worship notes for that day, and they're already on our website. So again, feel free to share those with worship leaders for the day, and follow the Safeguarding Sunday theme, which is Sunday the 19th of November. So I just wanted to close this afternoon with a prayer, which is from the Safeguarding Sunday resources. So please join me for a closing prayer. Dear God, help us to be a church that loves, welcomes, protects, listens, learns, serves, repents, restores, transforms, values, cares, believes. God of justice and compassion, hear our prayer. Help us, heal us, guide us, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen. So thank you all for joining us today. Have a lovely afternoon and evening, and keep a lookout for the things on the updates on the URC website and the newsletter next week. Thanks for joining us. Bye.